Movie theaters are pretty cool in theory, being able to see movies on a giant screen or what have you, but they're always a little bit of a risk given the fact that other people are there. Other people who may not necessarily be as, shall we say, dedicated to watching the movie as you might be. So, there's always a little bit of nerves for me, specifically at least, about whether the experience watching with other people in a theater is going to be good or not. So I always prefer to watch stuff at home because I have a good setup, so I can enjoy it just fine and not feel like I'm missing out on too much. But, I still try to watch a bunch of movies in theater when I can. I have an unlimited pass at my theater chain, so, it makes it easier to get out to more things. And additionally, while I may not want to see a movie that I feel confident is going to a streaming service or something like that, there's definitely some, like indie movies especially, where you don't know if you're ever going to get a chance really to see it again. Like Chimera is kind of an example of that, where who knows if that's going to pop up again. Like, it's going to get an Italian Blu-ray, and is it ever going to be on anything? Am I going to be able to watch it for like an end of the year list or something like that? Who knows? So, especially movies like that, I try to get to in theater when I get the chance. And the plus side with those too is that you're going to have fewer people in the audience. And usually if people are seeking out like a smaller indie movie like that, in my experience so far, it seems like they're more likely to be respectful and be invested in the movie and the experience. For these three movies I watched this weekend at the theater, I will note spoilers where applicable. None for La Chimera, but for Monkey Man and Civil War, there will be a little bit. So Civil War is a new Alex Garland movie. It's generated some buzz, some discourse, in part because it is, I believe, A24's most expensive venture so far. So it's a little bit of an experiment for them. But additionally, the film is set, as the title would suggest, a American Civil War. And people, putting that together with some statements Alex Garland made regarding political climate and things like that, and even someone was pointing out some right-wing people that were credited for footage or something like that in the credits. I don't know. People have been going on about it a little bit. So there's some momentum behind it. It's getting buzz for mostly positive reasons, apparently. It's well-received on Letterboxd, at least. It seems reviews generally are positive. So I think that discourse around it is interesting because I wonder how much that impacted expectations, at least for me. And I'm actually not going to go into spoilers on this part. I'll just try to keep it more general. Basically, the setting is not used as much as you might expect. And I think that's an interesting case study on how much expectations can impact the movie experience. I really wonder what I would think of the setting if I was completely blind going into it. I wonder if I would think it's as important as I thought it was going to be, just from watching the movie. Because the film is primarily about something else. The Civil War as a setting and as an idea is present, it is established, it is very lightly reinforced, but ultimately the film is concerned with something else. And watching it, I was kind of baffled by what it was going for. I think I might have still come away with that reaction, even if I didn't know what it was about and I wasn't aware of its setting or whatever, discourse around it. But, I mean, I just wonder. Because I would like to be able to watch a movie without external factors besides the movie affecting my opinion on it. That just seems most fair to the film. But of course, it's impossible. Our biases always affect everything in some way or another. So, it's just an interesting idea to me. Whether, how much expectations can and should affect things going into it. Additionally, I watched this in IMAX, which was fantastic. This is the first theatrical movie, I think, that I've seen in IMAX. And I'm just going to watch everything in IMAX that I can now. I was probably going to end up watching Challengers at some point. The Luca Guadagnino movie is coming out soon. But I was kind of reluctant. It didn't really seem that interesting to me. But now I've heard it's in IMAX, so now I'm excited for it because I get a chance to watch something else in IMAX, and it's great. One quick spoiler section for this one. I do think the Act 3 with DC is really excellent. I'm not, super familiar with wartime tactics or anything like that, so I don't know how accurate or what have you the maneuvering and tactics and things like that in DC were. But regardless of whether they were accurate or not, they were enough to get me on board. So I thought the action was tense and convincing. The fact is, by that point in the movie, at least I was pretty sure. I thought Jessie was going to die, really. Certainly with the risks she was taking, seemed like the logical conclusion to take. Of course, it ends up being someone else. But you have the building tension in that section. Alongside the fighting, she's getting more and more reckless, trying harder and harder to get the shot. So you have those two different methods of tension building up as we're approaching the White House, and with one of our characters presumably, getting at least more and more in harm's way. So there's a nice two-way tension there. City also looks really nice in that part of the movie. The nighttime setting is great. The way the city is lit up, not just with the city lights itself, but also like all the tracer rounds firing off in the background and the explosions and things like that. Like, the whole thing just looks really wonderful. So even if you skip the spoiler section, basically there is a section of the film that I think is really standout, that I think almost makes it worth it just by itself. Everything else is kind of like, I don't really find that much positive about it overall, besides the one spoiler section. Performances are all good. I think there's probably too many needle drop music moments. Sometimes I don't think the music is all that fitting or timed that well for the tone it's going for. I still think it's worth checking out. I mean, obviously a lot of people like it, so the odds are that anyone watching it would think positively of it. For me, I've got my reservations. I think it's a 55, but I still think it is an interesting movie to check out. Second for the weekend was Monkey Man, which is the debut feature by Dev Patel. He also stars in the film. And honestly, pretty solid job for a first feature, I think. I think the most encouraging thing for his prospects as a director would be just how creative he is with the camera. He has a lot of great ideas for, I suppose, some combination of him and a cinematographer have a lot of great ideas for how to not let the visuals grow stale. Camera's basically always doing something unique, something non-standard. It doesn't feel like it is just doing things for no reason. There's a lot of angles. There's a lot of, unique perspectives the camera takes. Sometimes it's intentionally disorienting, which sometimes a little bit too intentionally disorienting, I think, in some spots. But regardless, just a lot of creativity, some good set locations and colors from time to time. I don't think the style is strong enough to be like its calling card. Which is unfortunate, because I think the movie really needs a calling card for most of its runtime. There is a section, which I'll touch on later, which I think does have a strong calling card, which is awesome. But I'll get to that in the spoiler section. There's also some pretty nice music in some spots. Specifically, there's one part of the movie that has this Indian percussion music in it that I've never heard anything quite like before. They did some really unique things with their drums that I've never heard that kind of tone come out of them. So yeah, most of the movie I think is just fine, more or less. I don't think there is a strong point for most of it, I would say. But spoilers time. The strong point is Act 3, from when he enters the restaurant to when he faces the guru at the end. That whole section I think is top notch. That's one of the best sequences of action I think I've seen in a movie recently. Everything just clicks. Like, all of the purpose is there. The camera is like perfectly accentuating the action and adding more, frenetic energy to it. The score is really nice, especially when they get inside the first floor of the club. And, the first half of that scene has like this kind of cathartic, more gentle music associated with it. And then the second half has this drop into this metal song, which just goes crazy. It's so good the way that progresses, the music and also the action, as the scale of the action increases with more people. And then also I think it uses the environment pretty well in a few spots. Like especially the when he slams the guy's head on the stove and like lights him up with the liquor bottle. I think that's a great touch, something like that. I think that section alone is worth watching the movie for. I think that's really a standout moment. And that's another thing that really bodes well for Dev Patel as an actor. I think that's something else that bodes really well for Dev Patel as a director, being able to have something that potent, that well realized. You know, even if it is a minority of the movie, even if it is a relatively short section, being able to show that you have good creativity through the movie with some of the visual stuff, plus being able to put together something that potent, even for just one section. I mean, I think that's a great sign. I think Dev Patel's probably going to have some really good stuff coming down the pike if he continues to direct. So yeah, even though I think relatively little of the movie, I mean, like, it's still a fine movie for most of its runtime. It has an extremely strong section, and I think that alone makes it worth watching. So I'd recommend it. I give it a 65. Then the third one, I think I'm going to have relatively little to say on this one, which is kind of unfortunate because I think this is the best of the three. But this is La Chimera. I almost missed this one, actually, because my theater put it like at the very end of its screenings. I didn't even recognize the poster, really, so I almost scrolled right past it without noticing. But I'm glad I got a chance to see it, because I had heard some buzz about this one at festivals in 2023. And, I mean, it actually has almost been a year since it premiered at Cannes, so it had kind of dropped off my radar since then. It feels like, in a certain way, the reverse side of the coin of like an Indiana Jones, where it's about an archaeologist, still deals with some mythology, some romance, but it is certainly approached from a very different direction. Very low-key. It does have like a little bit of action, a little bit of, adrenaline in a couple of spots, but it is largely a kind of quiet, meditative look at, well, it's a character study. It is a kind of delicate-looking movie, and I certainly don't mean that in a bad way, if that could be taken in a bad way, I don't know. But the colors, to me, look very soft. The editing is pretty sparse. Lots of things have room to breathe, so we kind of get to linger in that delicate quality and in Arthur's kind of emotional state and what he's going through and carrying with him. It's just a really pleasant movie to watch overall. I think there's some cool thematic ideas running throughout it. The woman-led society props up a lot. That's probably the biggest, at least to me, the biggest thematic idea present. And I think that's kind of interesting to parse through. There's also the possibility that one of the characters is kind of a stand-in for Italy compared to perhaps the treatment of Italy's history by its people, something to that effect. Some awesome score work. There's some really rich classical music at points, some mesmerizing electronic stuff during one montage specifically, and some fun, presumably traditional Italian music kind of closing out Act 1 and Act 2. This movie generally did not strike me as anything extremely positive, but I think it's really well constructed. It is very empathetic to someone who's moderately empathetic, which I think is an accomplishment, coaxing more empathy than you would assume the character would entail, right? And I think of the three movies I watched this weekend, this one I am most likely to rewatch because I just feel like there's more to get out of it. I feel like I would probably score it higher. It would be nice to be able to get a chance to see this again. I hope I do. And I give this one a 70.